Hi, welcome to crazyforcars.com. I'm your host, Steve Gray. And as I've promised in previous episodes of the show, we'd have a technician with us doing a little bit of tech segment on the show. I have here with me Frank. It's Frank Adkins. He's a ASE certified master technician. He's published a couple of books. Any of you that are Mopar guys obviously know his name from all the Mopar magazines that he's been published in. We're going to do some light stuff today and get you familiar with some of the terms and stuff we hear talked about in the shop and at the car shows. Frank, it's nice to have you here today.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody at home. It's great to be here.
The first thing we're going to talk about is our first segment is going to be alignments. A lot of people are familiar with the camber, caster, and toe, like terms that get thrown around a little bit. And toe, of course, is like the wheels pulled in or pointing out, and the camber is leaning in at the top and leaning out at the top. People have a pretty good grasp of that, but I think the caster's adjustment is what they're having a hard time with. We've pulled the wheel off so we can get a good kind of eyeball on this, and we've got a motorcycle sitting right next to us. That's going to help us another visual aid. Why don't you explain to everybody what the caster adjustment is?
Well, first, I'd like to start with camber and toe. Camber is whether the tire leans in or out at the tops, as you mentioned. Positive camber, the tires lean out of the wheel well a little bit. Negative camber, they lean inward. So camber is most easily viewed from the front of the vehicle. Toe would be viewed from the top, and it's whether the tires point in or out as you're driving down the road. Caster is a stability angle. Camber and toe are tire wearing angles, but caster is merely a stability angle, and it has to do with the steering axis. And on this particular vehicle, up top we have the upper ball joint, and down at the bottom, behind the brake rotor, we have the lower ball joint. The steering axis passes through both of these ball joints. The position of these ball joints determine the location of that axis around which the wheel pivots when you steer. Now, if we were to draw an imaginary line through these ball joints, being our steering axis, if we tilt that steering axis towards the front, that's called negative caster. If we tilt it towards the back, it's positive caster. And on this particular vehicle, the caster is adjusted by moving one control arm forward or backward. So if we head over to the motorcycle, we can understand this a little bit better.
Frank, that made it easier for me to understand. Now, on the motorcycle over here, parked right next to the car, the forks come down at an angle, and that kind of demonstrates the angle like you're talking about.
Exactly. If we look at this motorcycle, the angle of the fork is our caster angle. And as you can see, that angle is tilted back towards the rider of the motorcycle. What that does, this is the axis around which the front wheel pivots when you steer. If we continue this axis down to where it meets the road, the contact patch of that wheel is behind where that axis meets the road. So when you're driving down the road, normal rolling resistance actually pulls that wheel back against that axis, causing it to go straight.
Now, that also helps to return the steering wheel to center when you come off a turn and you accelerate and the wheel kind of comes back by itself. This is that adjustment that helps that, right?
This is one of them, yes. Now, some older cars, they call it for negative caster, which means the steering axis actually goes the opposite way. It puts a contact patch ahead of the point where the steering axis intersects the road. And that actually, it reduces steering effort, but it doesn't lend itself to stability.
I thank you very much. Now, the last term, I'm going to throw Frank a little bit of a curveball. I don't know if we can cover this in this segment, but the fourth adjustment that people often talk about is bump steer. And I've seen on different forums and different discussions online people talking about bump steer, and they really don't have a good concept of what that is. Why don't you give us like little Mr. Wizard's version of what bump steer is?
Okay. The toe adjustment, as we mentioned, toe is whether the vehicle's tires point together in the front or point out as you're driving down the road. Whatever that setting is, as the suspension moves up and down, we'd like for those wheels to remain at their toe setting. And the problem is a lot of suspensions don't. The toe will actually change as the wheels move up and down in relation to the body. The bump steer itself is not an actual adjustment in most cases, but it is something that can be altered by moving steering pivot points higher or lower in relation to the wheels.
So most cars in just like normal day-to-day driving on highway stuff, it's really not a big deal adjustment. That's more something for a track car, something that's going to be heavily pushed into a turn where you're going to have the nose of the car dive when you're trying to turn into a corner, and that'll actually change the angle of the steering.
Correct. Yeah, on the average minivan driving down the interstate, not an issue. But on anything that's high performance, yes, you do want to make sure that the bump steer, a little bit of change, probably unavoidable, but you want to minimize that change.
Well, Frank, thank you very much. This is our first tech segment. Thank you, folks, for watching. Make sure you check out the website, crazyforcars.com. It's cars with a Z and the number 4 in the middle. If there's questions you've got, if there's something you'd like us to answer on the show, drop us a note. Put it in the forums and let us know about it. And just like anything else, the forums are completely free. The website's free, everything on here. Thanks for a lot, and we'll be back after this.